So the absence of hypnotizability gives you a 100% prediction that you'll become a dean. I can see that. Actually, Phil told me that it was a room full of gluttons for punishment, and they needed a psychiatric consult. So here I am. In line with what Dean Pizzo said, I want to dedicate this lecture to the memory of my father, Herbert Spiegel, MD. He died last December 15th at the age of 95. 3 days before he died, he was at Lenox Hill Hospital, not as a patient, but treating a patient I had referred who had intractable vomiting of pregnancy, and she was actually ordering food and starting to eat. So he died in the saddle the way he would have wanted to go. And I visited him a few days before. He had a shelf full of books on the neurobiology of consciousness and was lecturing me on it, telling me what was right in them, what was wrong in them, telling me what to read. And I said, Dad, you know, you're 95, why don't you give yourself a break and read a novel or something? And he said, David, there's enough fiction in the nonfiction I read. So I also had the great privilege and pleasure of writing a textbook on hypnosis, trance, and treatment with Dad. The first edition was in 1978 when I was just starting my career, and we've just recently published another edition. And although he was faculty at Columbia, we had a memorial for him there. I want you to notice that I got him into a Stanford shirt. So, and much that's in this lecture are things that I have learned from him and want to pass on to you. So what I'd like to talk about is mind and body in medicine, and I'd like to set up a kind of a contrast between modern biomedicine and very long traditions of healing, because some of the techniques we use are actually very old techniques. And I'd like you to just think about the ways you have been learning about the development of medicine and some other traditions. So in modern biomedicine, one of our major interventions is pharmaceutical agents, drugs. In traditional healing, it's herbs. So they're less refined substances that have a long tradition. Many of them don't do anything. Some of them do interesting things, actually. And one of the problems is that when an herb becomes effective, we redefine it as a drug. So the treatment for dropsy, which was congestive heart failure in the 17th century, was an herb called foxglove. And the key element in foxglove is digitalis. And so we now use digoxin as a primary treatment for congestive heart failure. So there has been some back and forth between traditional and modern biomedical treatments. Surgery is another major part of biomedical intervention. Various kinds of manipulation, ranging from therapeutic massage to acupuncture to yoga, have been a component of traditional healing. Psychotherapy is a domain that is related to modern biomedicine, but the first use of psychotherapy in Western culture was hypnosis. It's the first time a talking interaction was thought to have therapeutic benefit. And hypnosis is as well a part of traditional healing, along with mindfulness, meditation, many other techniques of self-regulating, of helping people to manage their own mental and emotional state. In modern biomedicine, we study disease-related stress. In traditional healing, we study stress-related disease. And so what I hope to do with that context is give you some examples of what we've learned about mind-body interactions. Now, one reason there's a problem is our current health environment. I'm sorry, Mr. McConnell. Your insurance plan only provides for empathetic nodding and a saddened downward glance. There's a $200 copay for any additional words of compassion, not to exceed 40 words or 3 expressions of sympathy or condolence. And all I can tell you is I wish this were funny. Unfortunately, it's far too close to the truth. And I think one of the reasons that patients have sought mind-body treatments of various kinds is that we've forgotten the oldest adage of medicine, which is that our job is to cure rarely, relieve suffering often, and comfort always. And with the Flexner era at the beginning of the last century, when medicine went from being a trade that you learned by apprenticing yourself to another physician to a science, which was a wonderful advance. So medical schools started to become scientific institutions rather than simply following a doctor around and learning to do what he or she did. We redefined medicine in a way that had advantages but disadvantages. So the new job definition became that our job was to cure always, relieve suffering if you have the time, and let someone else do the comforting. And I think that's equally wrong, because no matter how good we get at medicine, the death rate will always be 1 per person. You know, sooner or later, we're all going to die of something, and we will need people to help us whether or not they can cure us. And I think that's been one of the indictments of modern insurance-driven healthcare, that we focus too much on cure and not enough on care. That has driven people to seek mind-body approaches. This is a recent review from the National Health Statistic Reports showing that 38.1 million adults made an average of 10 visits per person to practitioners of complementary and alternative treatments at a total cost of $33.9 billion. People are spending more money out of pocket on mind, body, and other integrative medicine approaches than they are out of pocket on mainstream medical care. So there's a tremendous push from patients who are seeking something that they're not getting, despite all of the tremendous advances in high-tech medicine that you've been learning about in these courses. So it suggests that something is missing. Now, I think part of what's missing is the fact that we had a much better capitalist system of healthcare 50 years ago, when if you wanted medical care, you bought it, you paid for it, and you chose what you got. And the only part of the healthcare system where that works now is in the alternative medicine system, where if you want it, you choose it, you buy it, you pay for it, and if you don't like it, you don't pay for it. People have more control over their alternative healthcare than they do over their mainstream healthcare, and that's one reason they use it. But they're also seeking a kind of support and control in dealing with their illness that we tend not to give them in modern healthcare. So what I hope to do is give you some examples of how we can help people better manage themselves, manage their bodies, and deal with their illnesses. And there'll be 3 examples I'll give you. One involves hypnosis, a technique I'll call transformation, stress support in cancer, and then I'll talk a little bit about integrative medicine here at Stanford. So there has been growing interest in the role of hypnosis in medical care. This is from Time magazine a couple years ago. And they point out, you know, hypnosis itself I think of as something like the oldest profession. You know, everybody's interested in it, but nobody wants to be seen in public with it. And it has gone through one rejection after another. Freud used hypnosis when he first started psychoanalysis and quickly gave it up when a patient became infatuated with him, and he actually wrote in his autobiography, I was relieving this woman of her attacks of pain by using hypnosis to trace them back to their traumatic origins, and she threw her arms around my neck. He said, I was modest enough not to attribute this event to my own irresistible personal attractiveness. So Freud discovered transference, that patients have feelings about their doctors that may have something to do with someone other than them, and he abandoned hypnosis. Another example of the abandonment of hypnosis, this very powerful mind-body technique, is a young woman suffered from spinal weakness. She had to be carried from room to room by her father. And this happened through her adolescence, through her marriage, and only when she became pregnant did she decide she needed treatment. So she went to see a follower of Mesmer's, who was the founder of hypnosis, named Phineas T. Quinby, who used animal magnetism to cure her. And she was thrilled, she was walking, she didn't have the spinal weakness. 5 years later, they corresponded. Some say there was some closer involvement between the two of them. She got a letter announcing that he had died suddenly, and the next day she slipped on the ice, she re-injured her back, and she went into a period of mourning and meditation and decided that it was not actually animal magnetism that had cured her, it was the Word of God. Does anybody know who this woman is? That's right, it was Mary Baker Eddy. It was the beginning of Christian Science. And to this day, you can't mention hypnosis around a Christian Scientist. I was visiting the Mother Church back in Boston, which is an amazing place. It's like 1,000 people can stand up and give testimony to one another. And this woman was very nice, showing us around until she found out we were there from a hypnosis meeting. And she couldn't get us out of there fast enough. And the lesson for the day was hypnotism alias necromancy, denounced, loving the dead, that's what they call it. So you can't mention hypnosis around a Christian Scientist. So the tradition is there, but it keeps getting rejected. Mesmer was an 18th century Viennese physician who made quite a name for himself by inducing these altered mental states. And if you look at healing ceremonies around the world, a key element in the healing ceremony is inducing an altered mental state. Now, the interesting thing is that in the West, when we do it, we put the patient into the altered mental state. In the East, it's the healer, the shaman, who goes into the altered mental state. And I actually had a wonderful medical student here years ago, Amiteva Biswas, who went to Nepal for the summer, and I taught him how to measure hypnotizability. And he measured the hypnotizability of hundreds of Nepalese. And what we found was that the ones who chose to go to the native healers were more hypnotizable than the ones who went to the Western medical clinics. So they selected themselves for their ability to alter their mental states. So Mesmer, he got popular, he left his wife and family in Vienna and moved to Paris, where he quickly outcompeted the French physicians of the 18th century. Now, I ask you this. If you had a randomized study in which you've learned about randomized trials, in which you sent every other medically ill patient to Mesmer to induce an altered mental state, or to a French physician, how many think Mesmer's patients would have done better, medically ill? How many think the French physicians' patients would have done better? Well, the first group is right. You know why? Sorry? Bloodletting. The major treatment was bloodletting. Voltaire wrote to his brother, "We did everything we could to save father's life. We even sent the doctors away." And unless you happen to have congestive heart failure or polycythemia vera, you are more likely to be killed than helped by going to a doctor. This did not endear Mesmer to his colleagues in medicine. So he was investigated by a French panel of experts that included our own Benjamin Franklin, who was having a great time in Paris, the famous chemist Lavoisier, and a doctor well known for his work in pain control. His name was Guillotin. He kind of created the mind-body problem. And they concluded that what Mesmer was doing was nothing but heated imagination, which actually was probably true, but heated imagination is a powerful thing. And one sad footnote is that every member of that commission, except Franklin, actually died on the guillotine, so it was a dangerous time. Mesmer would have these paquets in which they would have weak magnetic fields and try to influence people's thinking and induce a hypnotic trance. You don't need any of this to do it. There are risks to animal magnetism, though, so don't say I didn't warn you.